Colorado State pass rusher Mohamed Kamara made the wish list ahead of the 2024 NFL Draft, and the Dolphins delivered. We're giving him his deep dive episode here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Cal Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, the author of Touchdown Miami. You can find our shows here on the Locked On Network on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Tip of the cap to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'll admit it, I've got a competitive side, and it loves Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. We are spotlighting the Dolphins' Day 3 picks with deep dive episodes here this week on Locked On Dolphins as we transition, give me a little bit of time to watch some film on the UDFAs. Then we can talk about the UDFA class. We got some time, right? I mean, we got like organized team activities and mini camps, but we got a little time before training camp. So we're going to take advantage of that time, be very thorough with a lot of these new Miami Dolphins. And Mohamed Kamara was one who, in the pre-draft process, I kind of was like, yeah, this dude can ball. The Dolphins just don't really have a pick in where he's projected to go. Well, lo and behold, he slides to the Dolphins in the 5th round, and for them to make this selection after trading up in day 3 from 2025 for Jalen Wright, who we talked about yesterday on the show, just an opportunity that's too good to be true. And I think the Mohamed Kamara discussion, as far as a lot of really good analysts and how they felt about him versus where he actually went in the draft, is an interesting one. You never know which ones of these guys the league is going to put their foot down on and say, we've got concerns based on the stature of the player, that there's a correlation. Because, on the other hand, out of a pass rusher out of this year's group, Braylon Trice was one that I thought had some of, if not more of, the same questions. He did not test as explosive. He had similar stature concerns as Mohamed Kamara. I mean, Braylon Trice was 6'3", 245 with 32.5-inch arms, ran a 4.7 with a 1.65 10-yard split. That's 41st percentile. He went 74th overall to the Atlanta Falcons. Mohamed Kamara, 6'1", 250, 32 3/8-inch arms. So what? He's 3 pounds heavier than Braylon Trice. He had 1/8 of an inch shorter arms. He ran a 4.57 with a 1.58 10-yard split. That's the difference. Hit that 10-yard split, first 10 yards of your 40-yard dash. Kamara was the 91st percentile, and Braylon Trice was the 41st percentile. And Mohamed Kamara goes twice as late into the 2024 NFL Draft as Braylon Trice did. And I think Braylon Trice, kind of similar book, not a big, super long pass rusher, but has power, good sack production. One of them did it at Washington, and one of them did it at Colorado State. I don't know if that's the divide, and that's the difference in one being a 3rd-round pick and one being a 5th-round pick. But if you told me they flipped spots, I said it probably would have lined up more with the athletic profiles of the players. So maybe athletic profile concerns were a contributing factor here. Maybe. I think another good example for Mohamed Kamara out of this class was Uchenna Nwosu a few years back out of USC. He's played with Seattle and had some success. That's a player who, similar profile concerns, 6'2", 250, 33.5-inch arms. So he's a little bit longer. Ran a 4.65. Okay, so there's some explosiveness with that athletic profile. He was drafted 48th overall. So I guess that's where I kind of struggle with why Kamara fell especially when I have my own opinion of Mohamed Kamara, and that's fine. But there's a lot of people that I have a lot of respect for that have done draft coverage and football analysis in this space for a really, really long time. And kind of the consensus from almost everybody that I talked to was Mohamed Kamara, we feel like is a top 100 player in this class. So it happens where the league will have their own exceptions to the rule. Generally speaking, short arm pass rushers that are productive have been given a little bit more grace than what Mohamed Kamara was. And there's questions with Mohamed Kamara's game. There's no question. I just went back and watched 3 more games, including a couple from 2022. But you know what? He had a darn pretty pass rush win that we're going to talk about against some school called the University of Michigan to start the 2022 season. That I think some of the glimpses from that game can at least give you some peace of mind that, okay, from a level of competition standpoint, and then he went to the Shrine Bowl and he kicked butt at the Shrine Bowl. So Mohamed Kamara being a player that was available was probably the most authentic best player available pick that the Dolphins had, if we're being honest. Him and Malik Washington, who we'll talk about later this week. But it was just really interesting to me to know what the profile is of a player like this, to know that the production is what the production is, which was outstanding, to know that there was a really good testing time and linear explosiveness for him that you would think, based on where teams have been willing to invest in a player like this from Power 5 schools, they might otherwise be willing to do it for Mohamed Kamara, and they did not. Mohamed Kamara finished his career, of course, at Colorado State. Redshirt senior, had the extra COVID year eligibility in his sophomore season. 29 and a half career sacks, 45 and a half career tackles for loss, 5 forced fumbles, 2 defensive touchdowns, including one in 2023 in his final season. He had 33 tackles for loss and 21 and a half sacks in his final 2 seasons at Colorado State, which is where he blew up. So we'll talk about how some of that production came, get more into his game, the leverage that he provides up next here on this episode of Locked on Dolphins. So make sure that you stick with us. Game off. We got to pause. And I got to tell you guys about Monopoly Go. And I can already hear you flag on the play, Kyle. You talked about Monopoly Go at the top of the show. But there's just so much good stuff to get into it in this game that I want to make sure that you guys know all the different ways that you can win with Monopoly Go. You can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. You can get unique stickers that you could trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel boards with, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends as you smash their buildings to bits and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There are a ton of unique mini games like digging for treasure. There's always timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's something fun to discover on Monopoly Go each and every day. So go get off the bench, download Monopoly Go. It's free on Google Play or the App Store. And game on. We're back. So Mohamed Kamara was a player who the motor that he plays with immediately pops. And that was something that when the Dolphins released the phone call from them telling Kamara that he was going to be the pick, was something that Chris Greer iterated early, talking about, we love to play the way you play the game. And then Mike McDaniel talked about and referred to Kamara as one of the most physical edge setters from a place that was near and dear to Mike, which of course is Colorado State, in Colorado, with Mike's background from Colorado. And you see that physicality, and you see the effort, and you see the leverage, and you see the hand power. And this is the kind of player where I think they're when you get into the limitations, and we'll touch about them and where there's area for growth with maybe where he's always kind of going to be handcuffed just because of his stature and his frame a little bit at the end of the show. But um, this is not a player that has marquee length, right? So the way that you offset that a lot of times is by having leverage, by having power in your hands. And I think that's the number one thing that, like, when you really slow down and you watch Mohamed Kamara, like, intently, and you're focused on the hands themselves, the disengagement isn't always there. That's something that I think is a big time area for growth opportunity for Mohamed, and that's going to allow him to take his game to the next level. But the pop, the power, the knockback, how he's able, if I am into my fit, and this is Michigan 2022, this is Colorado 2023, this is UNLV, this is all the other games that I watched throughout the course of this past season for Colorado State. I mainly watched the 2023 tape, and I watched Boise, Colorado, Washington State, and then I watched San Diego State. And then in the previous season in 2023, I watched Michigan, Washington State, Utah State, and then I finished with New Mexico. So some big-time programs in here, some not so big-time programs in here. But it didn't matter whether he was going against one of my big-time, like, positional room crushes from last year in 2022, which was the Michigan tight end room, where they had these big road graders and former tackles playing tight end, and Joel Honingford, or tight ends that ended up getting drafted on day 2 in the 2023 NFL draft, or going against offensive linemen. When he's aligned within his frame and he's playing with his pads in front of his hips, in front of his feet, and he throws hands, he might not have the reach to initiate contact first consistently, but holy cow, does he create jolt and knockback with his hands. And to know and to see, I thought it was very cool to see that be one of the first things that Mike McDaniel acknowledged about him as a player. Because no, I don't have 35-inch arms where I'm going to be able to long arm you and extend and lock out on you, and you're not going to be able to reach my chest and I can do whatever I want with you. But when there's explosive first step and you're in close quarters and you come out of the chutes and you're naturally low because you're 6'1.5", and you have everything in line, there's so much power there that the ability to knock back and reset the line of scrimmage, I thought allowed him to create a lot of space for himself to work off and make plays. Now, this is not somebody who is just going to be, and he lined up wide alignment and outside alignment quite a bit. I don't think he's somebody who's going to live in that world where we're outside, baked in natural leverage, be able to keep the outside arm free. I think he's a little bit more, because he is a little bit more of a linear player, was where he's at his best. So I think the ways in which you can allow him to not rely on leverage and being able to disengage off of blocks until he develops his hands and learns the ways to optimize his hands. He's maybe a little bit more of a tight alignment player early in his career. But then Colorado State walked him around, and he's just like Chop Robinson, standing up over top of the center on some long and late down passing distances. You see the ability with his first 3 steps of his pass rush move to get tackles out of their set as well. So I think early down, Mohamed Kamara is probably more of a tight alignment player, whereas late down and pass rush Mohamed Kamara, I thought his get off was better out of a 3-point stance than a 2-point stance, to be honest with you. But there's some interesting contrast with a player like Uchenna Nwosu, who we mentioned earlier in the show, who has some of the same qualities as a player who only recently flipped the switch as a pass rusher um, in Seattle by being kind of a versatile front piece. I think your rush packages for the Dolphins with Anthony Weaver between Chop Robinson and what we've kind of heard about the usage of the other guys, and now bringing in Mohamed Kamara, who I fully expect to make the roster and be a contributing player for the Dolphins this season. Um, there's a lot of versatility, and they're gonna have a lot of layers. And I think that's where knowing that all of these guys and then Jalen Phillips have all had experience rushing from 2-point stances in interior gaps gives you a lot of flexibility for how you utilize their different strengths and lengths and skill sets and first steps and leverage point to play through horizontal contact to press gaps or to isolate individual matchups. So I think there's a lot on the menu here. And Kamara does, I think, based on his early down work and his late down work, and we'll talk more about how he becomes a more complete player next. Um, I think there's enough on the menu where he is a continuation of that. And if this was really just he played at Colorado State, so we're a little bit more anxious and apprehensive about drafting him, even though there's examples of successful players like this that have come out, like an Uchenna Nwosu, or alternatively to say, oh, well, we got the same kind of kid out of Washington and Braylon Trice who cut 30 pounds, 20 pounds to run a 4.7 with a 41st percentile 10-yard split. But he did it at Washington, so we'll take him in the third round. I don't get it. I don't get it. Because if you asked me to hold those two players up against each other, I would take Kamara every time. And it's, again, I think not just the knockback, but the twitch to allow him to take advantage of the knockback that stands out to me. For Mohamed Kamara versus Braylon Trice specifically, one goes 74, one goes 158. So we'll talk about where Mohamed Kamara can get better and some potential areas for growth and just things to be mindful of with his game. That's coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. It is playoff time in the NBA and NHL. The Heat season, but the Panthers, vamos gatos, baby, round 2. Knocking out the Lightning with a big-time KO last night. Baseball is also in full swing. FanDuel is your place to bet on each and every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to place your first bet and make it an automatic win with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. The length is something that we do need to be mindful of. And the hand usage, again, is something that is a limiting variable within Mohamed Kamara's game right now. Do I ever want to doubt that a player that has the kind of intensity that Mohamed Kamara had in his introductory press conference with the South Florida media, he was like ticked off he went late. He should be ticked off. He should have been gone plenty before 158. But I'm glad that the Dolphins have a player like that with a chip on his shoulder who already is a super intense individual. You'd like to think that there's a lot of upside with a player like this, just because, again, he doesn't check the prototype boxes for length, but there are other athletic profile components that are like 90th percentile athletic tests. So, playing the run, I thought there were times he was wide alignment where he would get into either pullers or offensive tackles, and he would be content to take the edge and keep his outside arm free. But because he doesn't have a lot of length or the ability to stack blocks with a great deal of consistency, it's more jolt and knockback and then like find the ball and go. If he's just kind of content to hold outside contain, I think there were some times where he kind of got stuck on those blocks, where there was opportunities to press off and disengage and then get horizontal either to the sideline if the run bounces or cut across the tackle's face and make a play. Now, you saw that when he came out of the blocks, and if the tackle hinged a little too open, he'd be really strong with that inside arm. And when he threw it, unplug my mic here. When use my other hand, when he threw it to create the knockback, if the tackle hinges too open, the knockback gets the tackle uneven with the rest of the line of scrimmage, and then he could flatten and get down the line of scrimmage and make some of those plays. But when he's engaged with guys, there's a level of stickiness that's involved there that I think if he can undo that, or if he can find the ways that shorter arm players need to circumvent that, that'll really help him be a more productive 3-down player. And we've seen it happen, right? Like everybody points to Shaq Barrett, and obviously they both played at Colorado State. They're both 6'1", 250-pound pass rushers with a lot of production. Like there's parallels there too. It's not a coincidence that his name came up when we first went through Mohamed Kamara in the pre-draft process. That being a great player for Mohamed Kamara to learn from. But that element of his game is never really going to go away, right? Because it's why toolsy guys get drafted earlier, like it or not, because I can't teach you to have longer arms. I can teach you how to use your length if you have longer arms and you don't know how to use it. But if you don't have longer arms, you're never going to be able to teach that element of the game. So you have to have other ways to circumvent it and play around it. And for Mo, I think right now, the power and the knockback is kind of the thing for him that he's going to have to lean on and then build out upon that initial jolt that he has, all of the ways, plus continuing to polish it. And he's a well-experienced player, right, coming out of Colorado State. We mentioned five-year player. He was team captain in 2023 for the team. He finished second in career sacks and third in career tackles for losses in program history and had 33 starts. So this is not a player who doesn't have playing time experience, but I think what is interesting, hear me out, it's what's interesting, is he did convert from outside linebacker to defensive end full-time in 2022. And we mentioned 2022, 2023, the last 2 seasons. That's where he had 21 and a half sacks and 33 tackles for loss. That's really where the production profile exploded for him. So maybe you can say, well, there's some growth opportunity with hand in the dirt and changing roles, but then that versatility being an outside linebacker, is that something that he can bank upon if he's going to become more of an Uchenna Nwosu type of player who's like at times lines up in a Sam over top of tight ends? I'll say this, Kamara, I think playing him over top of tight ends in the run game, putting him on the strength and allowing his leverage to play under the pads of tight ends is a big time recipe for success. You just have to foil making sure he's playing forward, or he doesn't have to get into run pass conflicts where he potentially has to get out depending on how many rushers that you have. So there's again, I wouldn't want to play him in space or have him drop out, but you could play him in a 2 over top of tight ends to the formational strength and charge him with beating up tight ends. I think that's one way in which the knockback that he has and the leverage that he has, you're going to have to be a hella good blocker as a tight end to handle that. And you saw that, again, going back to Michigan. There were some penetration plays where guys kind of got into his frame and rode him down and flattened him out. But when everything was aligned and that linear profile could show up, some really good point of attack work for Mohamed Kamara. And then there's not a finesse element of it, but an explosiveness element that converts speed to power. And then you watch if tackles, if he is able in his first 3 steps, he's done a really nice job of selling the outside edge and taking the outside edge. The sack against Michigan was an outstanding 3-step. He kind of went on his 3rd step. He sold that he was coming inside across the face and froze the tackle. And then he came with a chop over the outside, turned the corner, flattened very tight. And you see these steep angles in his lower half because, let's be honest, you ever seen 18-wheeler on an F1 track? No, because they're big, they're tall, they're bulky. It's not a coincidence that these race cars are built low to the ground for low center of gravity. And that shows up with Kamara. And then there's like this pleasant lower half mobility. When you get to the top of the edge of the turn and you're trying to rush the passer and you got to flatten, and it's how steep of an angle can that inside leg take to get the cleats in the ground and stick and get the toes to turn towards the quarterback, or is it all just straight? And then you have to kind of stair step your way to turn the corner. You could see Mohamed Kamara create that tilt with his inside leg. And because he's so low, you end up getting this really low to the ground center of gravity, and tackles almost always. If he wins within the first 3 steps and takes the outside shoulder, they're down. They're punching down. They're folding down at the waist, trying to get over top of him. And that translates because he has the power to play through you if you soft set him. Now, his ability to get off of once he bowls you is a different story, that he kind of converts to a rip. But there's got to be some hand disengagement that plays with that to get himself clear for more finishes. Because if he just rips through, there were instances where he just missed plays because he didn't have the length and the tackle radius. So again, I think there's always going to be an element here where it's about how do you maximize your play while circumventing your physical limitations, because you're not the ball of clay that some of these other toolsy pass rushers like Jalix Hunt, who played at Houston Christian and was a safety until 2 years ago, and you watch him against Louisiana Tech, and he's got no idea what he's doing out there, but he still went in the 3rd round because he's long and bendy and explosive. Like, give me the guy like Mohamed Kamara every day of the week. As long as you, and this is where the coaching staff will come into play, can find the ways for him to help to navigate where he's always going to have to win in spite of. It's a great pick. I'm a huge fan of this pick for the Dolphins. And not just because he was on the wish list before the draft started, but that certainly doesn't help the cause when you're going over who you like and who you don't, and how excited you can get for the players. That is going to do it for us here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys checking out the show. Fins up. You can find us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. By the way, don't ask me to do Go Fins. I'm not doing Go Fins. I'll do Fins for the win. I'll do Fins up. Fins for the win for the hashtag, I think, would be Fins FTW. Much more favorable to Go Fins. Hashtag Go Fins. We can do better, guys. Let me be honest. But that's the story for the day. That's going to do it for us here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. Talk to y'all again soon.